let's start sewing. Alright, I am doing just a small little project here, pretty much one block, just so it's not so bulky. And I have already sewn my 1/4 inch seams. So what I'm talking about is, so when everything is pieced and on the grid, then we're going to fold right sides together and sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, what you want to do when you fold right sides together is, in fact, you'll hear me refer to fold on the fold line. And so the little dotted line is the fold line. And so the trick to getting really nice points and also just really nice even intersections is making sure that that dotted line is running right along that fold. And so, and especially when you're working with pieced squares, then this seam allowance gets a little bit more, I guess a little more tricky. What I have found is that it is actually a full 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you can do a little back stitch. The other thing that I have done with my seam is I have tightened up my stitch length just a little bit. So if you piece normally at a 2.5, then I would go down to a 2.0. Now you don't want to feel like you're not moving along, but you're just tightening up that stitch length a little bit. And what I've noticed is I'm using more of a full 1/4 inch seam allowance on that. Okay, now just like with all the rest of the grids, after you have sewn all your seams going in one direction, then you're going to clip in between each of those intersections right up to your stitch line. So what that means is right between each square, right up to your stitch line. Now I already have clipped the other rows. Okay, so now that we've got the iron, I just want to point out I'm usually not going to iron this close to the sewing machine, so I'll be careful, but generally we're not going to be that close. Okay, now when we are pressing, after we've clipped, we are going to press those seam allowances going opposite directions. And there's a few different ways to do that. This square that we're working on right now is the 2-inch finished, and so one thing about the 2-inch finished is you can see how I'm kind of maneuvering that iron up that row of stitching, and I am just pressing those in opposite directions. That's one way that I like to do it with this big one. Now another way, see I'm using steam also, and see I'm kind of pulling this a little bit. We'll talk about that in just a minute, but another way to do the pressing is to do a whole row at a time. Now I've got this one going. Let's just do this one more time. I fold that back, so I'm actually only pressing one row at a time. And I get those. See, I'm kind of pulling this just to separate that, I guess not separate, to tighten, flatten, that's the word. I'm just trying to flatten that seam out a little bit better. And then I'm going to fold that. And I'm going to do the next row. Let's do it this way. I'm going to do that next row. Again, making sure that it's going the way I want it to. Let's double check. Oh, that's going to go down. See, I was going to do that one wrong. See how that steam kind of helps that gives it some memory, holds it down nicely. All that, just got a couple more to go. I would say that the pressing, usually when we piece a block, we are pressing just maybe a few seams at a time, or maybe one quilt block at a time. And so sometimes when we're piecing on top of the grid foundation, it may seem a little bit daunting because we're pressing a lot all at one time. And so it's nice to be able to sit down while you're doing that if you can. It's even better if you can get somebody else to do it for you. But just so you're kind of aware that that is can take some time. Now, one thing I want to point out also, when you are pressing those seams on the back going opposite directions, when you pull it over to the front, you just want to make sure that these are nice and flat. You see right here, see how you can easily get a little fold in that. And so you want to make sure on the top or on the right side to really flatten those out. This actually brings up another thing about pressing that we have talked about before. When you are pressing from the top, even if your iron looks like it's really clean, it's really easy that when you are going over the seam allowance, and especially when we have a pieced square in there, it's really easy when you're pressing for the iron to leave a little, you know, little, not burn mark, but it'll rub off on there and just kind of leave a little bit of mark. So I use a piece of cheap muslin or just a real lightweight cotton dishcloth or something to put over the top of this and then press on the top. Okay, so now that that's pressed, we're going to do the other side. I'm going to set this out of the way. Okay, so now we're ready to fold right sides together going the opposite directions. Now when we fold on the fold line, this is one of the neatest things about this whole technique, in my opinion, is that after we've sewn the first direction and clipped and pressed, look what happens automatically. Those seams are nested automatically, so there's no adjusting, there's no pinning. We're just going to fold it on the fold line and we're going to sew the second direction. So when we are piecing half square triangles or a pieced square, after I sew the seams going in one direction and now I'm coming to sew the second direction, let me just sew this one and I will kind of explain what I'm talking about. This is where I'll double check myself. I won't just sew all these second seams. I want to sew one row and then check my points, because when we say 1/4 of an inch seam allowance and we have 20 women in the class, we're going to have 20 different seam allowances, and it's always just, you know, very minute changes, but we all have a different seam allowance. So after you sew that second seam, then that's when I want to come back and check, and I think those look pretty great. And so you can double check yourself. The other thing that you're going to look for is after you've sewn that first seam, do you see here where here's my 1/4 inch seam allowance? It's going to be right there. And so I know, see, you can see it right here on these points of the star, so that when I fold this together, when I do that full 1/4 inch seam allowance, those are going to be caught. If you find that you have no seam allowance in here, then you just need to double check the placement of that half square triangle. And so that's how we're going to get really nice points every single time, with no pinning and being able to do whole sections of the quilt or just a block at a time. Now there's one more thing that I want to share with you before we close for today, and it's not a sewing part, but I wanted to show you some really fun blocks that I've been working on. I'm going to slide my machine out of the way a little bit. And so what I just wanted to show you is just some fun separate blocks. Now with a lot of the quilts, we are piecing a section of the quilt at a time. We're dividing that quilt up into sections that are the size of the grid panel. Now in one of the previous videos, and I am demoing with a 9-patch, it's how to sew separate blocks, not a whole section of the quilt. And so in that video we are sewing just separate 9 patches. So I wanted to show you these blocks to show you that I'm going to show you that. So it's the same process as sewing those 9 patches, but in this case we have a block that's actually a 16 patches, 6 blocks by 6 blocks that are, right, let's call it squares. 6 squares by 6 squares is making up this whole block. And of course on these I am incorporating half square triangles. And so I just kind of wanted to show how it doesn't need to be something as simple as a 9-patch. You can actually piece any quilt blocks right next to each other. And again, with the half square triangles, I'm just making sure that that seam of that piece squares going right from corner to corner, and I know these points are going to turn out great. So I hope that you learned something today. I am really excited about not only piecing on the foundation, but what bringing in pieced squares is going to mean to your quilt projects. I hope you go and look at some of your quilt books or some of your quilt patterns and realize how many of those can be pieced on the Ten Sisters Easy Piecing Grid. One thing, for instance, the book that I got these blocks out of is that darling book by Lori Holt called Farm Girl Vintage. And in her beautiful book, her blocks are 1-inch finished squares or 2, meaning a 6-inch block or a 12-inch block. But I'm piecing mine on a 1.5-inch finished square. So my blocks are going to be right in between those two that are in her book, because I'm piecing it on the foundation and just choosing the size that I want. So I hope that you'll go and look at some of your quilt patterns and some of your quilt books and realize that so many of your projects can be pieced on the foundation, either a block at a time or the whole quilt at the same time. And so I'm really excited to see what everyone comes up with. I want to thank you for coming to class today. Be sure to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to Ten Sisters TV. Any of the things that we have talked about today, other people's products, we'll be sure to put a little link for their website below. And I want to welcome you to, or be sure to have you come by tensisters.com. We've got some fun new patterns. Our book 10 Quilts for 10 Sisters is there for you to order along with the grids. But we have some fun new patterns that I'm really excited for you to see. So thanks for joining us today, and thanks for coming to class.